Hi guys, my name is Ian Crew. I'm an instructor at the Joy of Dance Center in Toronto, Ontario, and the creator of SocialBallroom.Dance, where you can learn your dance at your place on your schedule. We are continuing our theme this month on dance wear and what we might wear to different dance venues. And today I am joined by Stephen James, a fellow dance instructor at the Joy of Dance Center. Stephen has danced at a number of different dance places, from Latin nightclubs to West Coast swing dance halls to ballroom dancing, both socially and competitively. So he's had a fair bit of in the field experience, we might say, in seeing what other people wear and why. So great to have you with us, buddy.
Thank you.
So let's start with an easy one. Do people wear what they wear just because they want to look fashionable or good on the dance floor, or is there more practical reasons why?
Certainly some people do, I imagine, but there should be a practical reason for choosing what you're wearing on the dance floor. If, for example, in competitive ballroom, you will see people, and this is not exactly a costume, but if you think of the whole look as part of the costume, will always have their hair tied back,
Right,
for example.
right.
Slicking back your hair keeps it out of your partner's face. It's less distracting to the judges. That's something specifically for ballroom.
Mm-hmm.
You notice a lot of tighter fitting clothes in Latin. It's usually so you can see body movement. So they want to see if you can do a rib isolation or something with your body. And loose fitting clothing wouldn't really work there. So socially speaking, if you're going to dance socially, you should be kind of asking a few questions of yourself. First of all, what time of year is it? That's practical. Is the place air conditioned? There's some places where you'll dance, especially West Coast swing, you go to some places there's just no air conditioning, so you have to dance appropriately. I always think practical, but you can't help in a social situation wanting to think aesthetically as well, and that's great. You do want to present yourself when you go out in public, but I think it should be secondary to some very important practical considerations when you're going out dancing. Are you wearing something that is going to get caught in your partner's hands or arms, for example?
Right.
So loose-fitting clothing that has, especially things that have like weaves or dangling bits or belts that kind of hang out, or those mesh. If it's like a really thick mesh, you can get fingers stuck in it. Stuff like that should be avoided.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of my students, she likes to bring these. I guess they're called sweater vests. I don't really have any experience in fashion of any kind, but when they have, it's basically they create these almost wings that hang down from their arms, and
right.
Then when they turn, it's just an invitation for them to just get caught on all kinds of things.
Wings will flap.
Yes, and then
right.
I politely ask her to remove it, and then it's okay. So we've
open vests will do that same thing sometimes. They're very popular in West Coast swing right now for people to have an open vest or something like that on, but that can sometimes fly and get in the way. Then again, that can also be a source of fun in that particular dance, because you get snagged in a costume and a jack and jill. You can be a moment of improvisation, which could be a gift from God to you in that moment. But generally speaking, on the social dance floor, you want to avoid anything that's going to snag on your partner. You also want to think about something that's not going to make you feel too hot or too cold. Usually too cold is not a problem when you're dancing. Get too hot, then we run into the issues of people sweating a lot. I know there's some guys who will wear one shirt to the dance and they'll bring a spare to change into later, which is really smart, because nobody really wants to dance with somebody covered in sweat. Yeah,
it's not pleasant. No. What are some other costume differences that you've noticed between, say, people going salsa dancing or Latin dancing in general versus West Coast swing dancing versus, ball? What are some examples you've seen?
Aside from practical, if we start with the aesthetic, every dance has a sort of a look to it. Ballroom dancing, smooth and standard both, have a very classic look. They want to, if you think of something you'd wear for a night on the town, evening wear, formal attire, something like that, people will compete sometimes in a tuxedo, a variation on a tuxedo. They will, of course, tailor them specifically for competition. So you wouldn't wear a normal tux jacket, for example, on the dance floor, because when you lift your arms up into your frame, the shoulders bunch up and they look kind of ridiculous. So they're actually tailored to look proper when your arms are held up in your frame, and when the arms relax, they don't have as nice a look for them. So they're specifically designed for dance. Some of these suits that you...
Specifically the ballroom dances when you're up in that frame.
Competitive ballroom dancer, when they're up in that frame. And they're going for the look of the dance. So waltz, foxtrot, we think of a classic night on the town, so that's the image that you want to put on the dance floor, so people will wear clothing appropriate to that. Salsa dancing, something you'd wear out to a club, right? This is not just something for hanging out casually at home. It's usually a bit more loud and has some color to it, has sexiness to it. It's it's clubwear, basically. West Coast swing prides itself on being very casual, so people don't want to go too much in the department of putting on extra airs. The more chilled out you can look, the better. So it was very popular to, for example, wear the bow tie but then untie it and leave it hanging down on either side.
Right.
Again, for performances and competitions.
I sometimes feel like West Coast swing is almost a reaction to what's worn in ballroom, at least competitively.
A reaction to other dances, absolutely. Ballroom in particular, maybe, yeah. It's definitely prides itself on being different, and we don't have to put on these particular airs. We don't have to match someone's idea of what a dancer should look like. You can be free to sort of express yourself and be chilled out and relax and just go out and have a good time. And that's what they want to see on the floor, even in competitions to a certain amount. There are some West Coast swing competitions that will say, for example, no jeans. The fact that they even have to say that, like you wouldn't even have to say that at a ballroom competition.
Oh dear, no. Putting on jeans, what are you doing here? So when we're talking about now just ballroom versus Latin or nightclub styles, why do skirts tend to be longer for, your waltzes, your foxtrots, your tangos versus your salsas, your merengues, your cha-chas?
Well, there's two reasons. One is the look you're going for in the elegant evening wear and smooth and standard, so you want to have something that flows. You're flying around the dance floor in doing a Viennese waltz, having a dress that flares, looks fantastic. In the Latin dances, you want to see knee and hip movement. So a dress that covers your knees, you can't see as much what's going on with the legs. So there's practical side to it. And then there's, of course, the culture attached to the dance. Latin dances, again, typically come from more of a club environment, whereas our smooth and standard are inspired by this formal, more, I suppose, an example of Viennese waltz, we're talking about European, upper class look. So the long skirt is that tradition. So there's the tradition that the dance that has been passed down within the dance, and then there are the practical concerns about what they're looking for. So
right. It's very grandiose in that way, and I suppose that's why a lot of people, ladies, can live out their Cinderella stories with the glamorous gowns, for example.
That is that's your waltz, your Viennese waltz for sure.
There's and then can be the Mr. Rights with their tuxes and the coattails and so on.
Sure. Everybody loves a little Disney every now and then.
I guess so, yeah. So we know that ballroom dance shoes, the heels tend to be lower versus the taller heels in Latin.
What you're going to ask me now.
Yeah. What the heck is with that?
The Latin heel.
Yeah.
A lot of people, or the Cuban heel as it's sometimes called, a lot of people really don't like the look of it. It has a practical purpose in that the higher heel brings you forward on the balls of the feet. It helps with the articulation of the ankles and the knees and the hip movement and your body position. Is it necessary to do them? No. It helps. And it's become part of the look. I personally don't wear them outside of the competition floor. If I'm competing in Latin, I'll wear them. Even if I'm doing a performance at the studio and it's a Latin performance, I'll tend not to wear the Latin heel. I'm not as big a fan of walking in them. God bless the women who can wear heels. I don't. It's not. Even the little Latin heel, which a Cuban heel I understand, it is not a high heel by any stretch, but it's got a bit of height to it.
Yeah.
And that's enough, I'll
never forget when I first wore Latin heels, and after, 15 minutes, I was starting to hurt. It's like, and the ladies that I was teaching were just completely unsympathetic, of course, because it's like, you think that's bad. Now, we were talking a little bit about the practical versus the aesthetic side. We've talked about it quite a lot. But when we talk about competitions, is it really necessary for people to go super glamorous with all the rhinestones and the glitter and the hair pullback and so on?
Good question. I'll start with ballroom and specific on that. There are some rules where you actually are discouraged from wearing I think in some competitions you can't wear rhinestones at a lower level, at lower entry level. So if you're starting as a new dancer, it's your first competition, you're doing a pre-bronze heat, for example. In Pro-Am, you can't wear rhinestones. You can't wear these Swarovski crystals in most comps. And I think that's to make it a little bit more accessible, too. First-time competition, okay, you're telling me I have to learn all of this technique, fantastic. Now I'm committed to those lessons. That's a fair amount of money for me. And now I'm going to go compete, and okay, I have to get a dress that costs how much money? Or I have to get an outfit that costs how much money? That's a lot to ask. So to even the playing field, they simply disallow it at the lower levels, allowing more people to get into the dance without having to go to those extremes, because it is a bit much. Those things are glued on individually, and that takes a lot of someone's time, and if you're not going to do it yourself, it's going to take a lot of money to pay someone else to do it, in addition to purchasing the crystals themselves and getting a dress designed or a tux designed or whatever you're going to wear. So it's a fair commitment. So at the lower levels, they don't expect that. At the higher levels, if you're not doing that, I think it's reflects on you that you're not as sort of committed to the culture of the dance. And that is those over-the-top costumes, which we love to criticize, but at the same time, some of us really, some secretly, some not so secretly, love to put on because they're so fabulous.
It's all Cinderella thing again.
Right, exactly. So, yeah, you kind of got to go. If you're going to go in, you go all in. And then by the time, if you're committed to the dance enough to get to those higher levels of competition, you usually have gone all in for the for the dance world. And so at that point, it's time to show it in what you're wearing.
Is that the same for performances, would you say?
No, for performance, I think about what's our audience and what's our venue. Okay, for example, we've done at the studio summer dresses and jeans parties that it was on top of the old Ontario place. We were outdoors, sun was setting, it was a beautiful venue, but it had a casualness to it.
Sure.
So I didn't go as extreme in my costuming that night. Something in-house at the studio, I might not be encouraging my students to wear full-on crystallized costumes, but if you're going to go to an event, especially a ballroom event, then I would. So the venue is something to consider. Who's it for? Are we in a casual scenario? Am I doing a performance at home for mom and dad? Like, that's a very extreme situation, but there are grades to that.
Okay, so are there any final tips that you would give our listeners about, whether they're competing or they're social dancing, just general tips on just wise decisions when it comes to their costume? And that includes like hair, shoes, the whole getup.
Okay, yeah, we've probably missed quite a few things then. I don't think I've talked about. This is not something you wear as a piece of clothing, but it is something you wear, and that's perfumes. Perfumes, colognes, any fragrances. I'm a big fan of deodorant. I think you should shower and wear your deodorant, especially when you're dancing socially.
I need to jump in real quick about that one, actually, because I've heard studies that the absolute number one turnoff for ladies when it comes to meeting any guy, regardless of whether they're attracted to them romantically or not, number one thing is BO.
Absolutely. Yeah. Not just, we're talking not in the dating world, but in the dance world here, just nobody wants to dance with somebody who's odor they cannot handle. And that goes both ways. So I'm saying, yes, put your deodorant on and shower, but don't slather yourself in perfumes and cologne to try to cover things up as well, because that can be offensive in its own right. And there's allergies you have to take into account. Some people, physically, their eyes will water. They will have reactions to strong spills like that. So it's disrespectful to your fellow dancers to be walking into a room that's typically crowded and an enclosed space wearing that kind of perfume. So I'd say that's something you want to avoid. Oh, jewelry and things like that.
Yes, that's right, jewelry.
They can get snagged. So bracelets, rings even. I've had issues with rings holding people's hand in a dance, and the ring can be very uncomfortable in the hand if it's something that has a lot of gems on it or it's rough edges to it. And especially if it's loose fitting, it kind of flops around and ends up being on the wrong side of the finger there, can get in the way. I'm not suggesting anyone take off their wedding ring when you're on the dance floor. Those things they're fine. They're smooth.
But if you're going to buy your partner a wedding ring, be aware that if they might go out dancing, that might be part of your choices when you're getting that.
Well, you really are committed to dance if you're making your wedding ring choice based on dance considerations. Kudos to you if that applies to you. I've had issues with cufflinks. My cufflinks sometimes getting caught once in someone's hair. That was very awkward.
Ooh.
Yeah. So I debate with them. I like them so much sometimes, and it depends on the dance. If you're doing a standard dance, you're never going to do an underarm turn. You're all good to go. But in a salsa club, when you're constantly spinning your partner, a cufflink might be a bad idea.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This is great. We came up with a lot of things that certainly never occurred to me, and I think we both went places that neither of us expected to go.
Always a good day.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure a lot of these are just my opinions, right? Some take them as you will.
Well, sure, of course. Everybody's going to have their own take on things, but I really appreciate your input on this. Thank you very much for joining us, Steve. And for those of you who would want to contact Steve and if you're interested in lessons and so on, you can always just get in touch with the Joy of Dance Center and ask for him. But thank you very much for listening in, and I look forward to going further with this on you, or further with you on this.
That'd be appreciated.
That's the better way of saying it. Next week, and until then, happy dancing.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
Cheers.